Hello everybody, it's a great pleasure to be standing up here in front of you. I haven't done this very much, so just hoping to find my notes and keep on top of what I'm saying. There's been lots of really interesting talks today, and I hope that mine will link in, first of all, with there was this talk about touch, importance of the touch and emotional closeness. We've had the importance of resilience, of learning to get into your body, the importance of movement in early years, and also about play. And then also Susan Greenfield, and I'm sorry, but I didn't take a lot of that in because I was worried about getting up here. So you'll have to excuse me on that one. But I'm going right back to the beginning, the first 18 months, because that's where it all starts and where we can put so much in place. And I want to talk particularly about a very exemplary approach to the care of very young children that was developed in Budapest. And I've called my talk Conscious Care, 21st Century Early Childhood Care. So what is conscious care? I thought, first of all, we could look a bit at unconscious care. And for that, I would like to do an exercise with you. And I would like you to imagine this. So you're comfortable? Ready to go? Okay. I want you to imagine that you're sitting here, watching me, and suddenly, without warning, the person next to you launches at you with a cold baby wipe, smothers your face, gets hold of your nose and gives it a good, and then swipes back again and disappears without saying anything or without looking you in the eye. Do you recognize this? Yes. It's something it's fairly shocking actually, but it's something that we do all the time to young children, whether we're wiping their noses, we're putting on their clothing, we're putting on their hats, we're taking off their coats, we're changing their nappies, we're feeding them, they're putting in their buggies, we're taking them out of their buggies. We do it all the time, and we do it out of a lack of consciousness towards the young children in our care, and it's profoundly disrespectful. What I want to bring to you today is an approach to caring for young children which is very exemplary in its approach. But it's not very well known in this country, the Pickler approach. It's known in Europe, and it's been taken over to America as resources for infant educarers by somebody called Madga Gerber. You might be more familiar with that name, especially if you're in daycare. But it hasn't been known in this country at all, and I don't know. I have my own theory about John Bowlby actually going over and actually visited the institute, and because of his own history of institutions and nannies and such like, didn't feel that it was the way to go at all. And I think it was a big opportunity missed at that time. I trained there in 2008 at the Pickler Institute in Budapest. Actually, I was the first British person to go over there. And they looked at me and they said, "Are you from Britain? We thought you were in the Dark Ages, still beat your babies." No, we don't beat our babies. But they have people that come in from all over the world to find out about the work that Emmy Pickler, pediatrician, discovered in the 20s and 30s, 40s, when she was a pediatrician. It's absolutely transformed my work. I've been in Steiner education since my son was 1, and it deepened and really opened new doors for me in terms of understanding the very young child and what we can do to put things in place right from the beginning. And I do consultancy now and also run mum and baby groups that are inspired by this approach. So I hope I can give you something at the end of this talk to take away that is very practical in your work. I have a quote here I want to show you. World peace starts on the changing table. Apparently it was a colleague of Emmy Pickler's who said that. Actually, I think there's a PhD in this statement, because how we go about changing nappies is it's the most intimate moment of care, isn't it? And we often try and rush to get through it as quickly as we can. But it's something that we do 4 or 5 times a day for 3 years, for at least 3 years. So it's something that's gets very much into the child's body, absolutely into the child's body. I've got a little story. I did a sort of psychoanalytic child observation course, and I observed this little boy. He got on very well with his mother. He had a very good attachment with her. But things weren't so good on the changing table. He really didn't like to be changed. And so his mother would give him a toy to play with, and she would, and she'd just get on with the job, really, as fast as she could. So she didn't look at him, she didn't talk to him. I saw that he got involved with this toy. His mind went somewhere else, and his legs and feet became like rag dolls, totally lifeless, like he dissociated from here down. I wondered afterwards, well, the other thing that happened was sometimes he would get quite angry and he'd want to hit her afterwards. And he had a good attachment with her. They had a really good relationship, but there was this bit that was very difficult. And I often wondered if it would affect his sexuality at all as a grown-up man. I mean, he could have been a girl, but I'm sure there must be a link there somewhere between what happens 4 or 5 times a day for 3 years and how things pan out a bit later on. So we can say that there are profound effects of our early experiences of care, even though we might not remember. We won't remember anything from the first 3 years. It can be big trauma and neglect. It can be total overstimulation. And it can also be those things that happen day on day on day. And we do need a new level of awareness about this. I feel like it's very much time to do that. We need a new level of care, new level of conscious care for the 21st century. And I'll tell you why. This is my big sort of vision, I suppose, is that children being born now that are going to have to cope with sort of world conditions like global warming that we can't even imagine now, maybe in 20 or 30 years' time. So we need people that are going to grow up to be as whole and creative and purposeful as we can possibly do with our skills. They need to be healthy, and they need to be fully in their bodies, and they need to have a resilience to cope with anything that might come in 20, 40 years' time. And this is why I've called my talk Care for the 21st Century. But first of all, though, before I go into the main body of my talk, I want to talk a bit about Emmy Pickler, because you might have heard of her or you might not. And she sometimes gets muddled up with something else that's called the pickle something from Pen Green, is it? I don't know. Anyway, she's called Emmy Pickler. And she was born in 1902 and trained as a doctor in Vienna. And this was at the time, in the 20s, when Freud was about, and all these people who were beginning to realize that what happened in childhood had an effect in adulthood. And so she was part of that. And then she got married and got pregnant, and I think she must have had a really revelatory moment on a holiday in Italy when she was watching parents playing with their young children, bouncing them up and down, doing what you do with children. And she realized she didn't want to raise her child like that she wanted to raise her child respectfully in main two ways. One was to allow the child to come up into standing on its own without any interference, and the other way was to really be respectful to the child in the care, especially in the bodily care. So she did this with her daughter Anna, and then she moved to Budapest and opened up, she was like a family pediatrician, and she had over 100 families that she worked very, very intimately with. And then after the war, she actually initiated the setting up of an orphanage in Budapest. And this is where she put these principles into practice with orphans. And she wanted to prove that she could, in this institution, she could actually avoid the damage that's done in institutions. And she did. These children came out wonderfully healthy. They were physically healthy, emotionally healthy. They grew up, they got married, they had kids. They were just normal people. And she did this by taking some of all the principles that she'd worked with, first of all, with her own daughter, and then as her work as a pediatrician, she took that into the institution. This is a picture of the Pickler Institute. It's still there. It's called Lotzi. That's the street it's on. The orphanage is closed now, but at the institute, they have daycare groups, they have parent and child groups, and they also have training courses in the summer which attract people from all over the world. So when I did my training, there were people from New Zealand, from Holland, from America. It was a very international group of people every year that go to the Pickler Institute to learn more. Anna Tardos, her daughter, runs the institute now. There are associations all over Europe, and as I said before, Resources for Infant Educarers is well known in America. We've just, a few of us have set up the UK Pickler Association now, where we've got there's information about courses and trainings that will come up. Emmy Pickler's vision was of a healthy infant was that he was an active component and a peaceful infant who lives in peace with himself and his environment. And this is what she was able to do with these principles of respectful care. She really taught her carers a very high level of care to form healthy bonds with the children. And this is the genius bit, I think, of her way, her approach, was that she taught her carers to give this care and to form this attachment primarily during the times of bodily care. So when they were changing the nappies of the children, when they were feeding them, when they were bathing them, when they were putting them to bed, when they were picking them up, those were the times when the attachment was formed with the young child. I think that's one gift, one huge gift that the Pickler Institute can give us, just that sort of thought. The other thing that she gives us is that in the over 50 years of running this orphanage, she allowed the children to come up into standing without interference, without any adult interference. I think it's probably the only place in the whole world where that was allowed to happen. And the other thing she was a fantastic observer, and she and her staff wrote down so much of the observations, very astute and very detailed observations over 50 years. If you want evidence-based research, go to the Pickler Institute. It's 50 years of seeing that children come up into standing in a particular way, that each child might do it in their own timing, and some bits might be longer and shorter, but each child goes through exactly the same process up into standing, and in so much detail. And I think that's the other gift that the Pickler Institute has given us. So you could say that the two main principles that she gave were this respectful caregiving routines and self-initiated movement and play. So for the rest of the talk, I'm just going to divide my time, probably like 3 minutes on each, into 4 main sections. What I call the lemniscate of care, and then look at the principles of respectful care in a bit more detail, look at the natural progression of motor skills and play, and then I want finally to look at a blind spot that we have many blind spots culturally, but I just want to look at one in particular. So let's look at the lemniscate of care. So the very young child, the baby and the very young child have two main needs. They need the time with the carer, we know that, to create attachment and bonding, empathy, just the child needs that right from the beginning. But in balance to that, they need time on their own. And they're not abandoned in a room, but time on the floor to be able to move and play and learn about their bodies and learn to come up into standing. So they need both. And I think this second bit gets a bit lost. So you've got the need for the attachment and bonding, where the child is filled with love and care, and then time for the child to be on their own. And this bonding happens, mainly during the times of bodily care, and this time is with the parent or the carer nearby, but the child has time on its own. If it's done well, you can see that the time with the carer, the peace and calmness in the presence of the carer, is internalized by the child. Causes so there's a sort of peace, a core of peace and contentment within the child, because they've been given the full attention of the carer during these. Oh no, 5 minutes? No, 10. I can't do it in less than that, because you're going to miss the best bits. Oh dear. So so this is really helpful in terms of daycare, to be able to split these two areas out, because what happens is everything gets muddled up. Carers feel we have to be entertaining the children all the time, but the times of bodily care are done very fast and without real presence, so the child never feels really filled up by love and presence. So by actually putting them apart a bit and having them as a balance, you can really get the best of both, and you can create a much calmer environment for everybody. And certainly in daycare, this is what they found, that it actually creates a much calmer, nicer environment. These are some of the principles of respectful care during bodily care. I hate having to rush this. Just give me 12 minutes. Give your full attention and presence to the child in your care. Use gentle gesture, eye contact, warm speech to connect with the child. Slow down. Slow down. Use the time to build trust and relationship. Carry out the care with the child and not to the child. Encourage their cooperation from birth. Don't do anything before you've told the child simply what you're going to do, and then wait for their response. We had this earlier, just how important. If you pick up a child when they're still tense, that tension goes into the body. If you wait, the child will, especially if they like what's going to happen, they will relax, and you can begin to tell and work with that. So you're working with a child who's wanting to cooperate with you, rather than a child that's pushing intention against you. Use respectful touch and give the care in the same sequence, so that the child feels secure in what is happening. And these are some lovely pictures from the Pickler Institute of the happy times that the children have with their carers. So I want to go on to the next bit, which is about the other side, which is the natural progression of gross and fine motor development. If you look at this chart, which is the result of 50 years of observing children, you'll see that if you put a little baby on its back, that it will naturally turn, when it's ready, to its front. It will begin to creep and crawl, then come up into sitting, and then come up into standing. This is the natural way that the child will come up into standing. What happens is that we actually assume, and I'd be interested to know what your thoughts on this, but in every textbook that I look at in terms of child development, we assume that the child sits up before it crawls. Actually, it's the other way around, and it has enormous implications in terms of what happens a bit later. And I do need time to do this, otherwise it's just not going to be able to get the message across. So I just want you to see that this is something in the parent and baby groups that I run for 4 years. This is what I see. This is what happens. And the child, by the time they get to sitting, they have this a variety of sitting positions. They can get in and out of sitting very easily. But it does mean that you shouldn't put the child into any position that they can't get into themselves. If you do that, it messes this up, which I'll show you in a minute. So this is it's not only just the gross motor development that they tracked and they observed, but also the fine motor development has its own sequencing, very intricate way in which children learn to find their hands, start banging things together, picking things up. They tracked all of this in minute detail, and I can see it in the children that I work with. You can see it unfolding, and you can see that it's play. It's play, learning about their bodies, learning about the materials in the world. And these children, when they are allowed to have this lemniscate of care, are very happy to play on their own. This is the beginning of play. And I think that when you've got a 4-year-old who doesn't know how to play in nursery, it's because he hasn't had this early time of learning to do it. I mean, there are babies in my mum and baby groups who will play happily on the floor for an hour. I mean, the mums are there around them, so they're contained and they're happy, but they're really content. I can have 8 babies in a room, and it's quiet. You could hear a pin drop because the babies are just getting on with their work, and the mums are sitting back, relaxing, and the children are content in having that freedom, absolute freedom to move how they need to move and to play in the way they need to play. So here's some babies at Pickler Institute, and here are some in my groups doing their thing. Oop, I was about to miss the important thing. Now, can you see this? What we do, and this is really important, this is a blind spot. What we do is sit our babies up, right at the top there, okay? So they can miss out this whole middle bit of going through the crawling up into standing. If you go to most parent groups, babies are sat up, expected to be sat up from very, very early. It's just culturally, it's what we do. And then, of course, you've got all of these, as we saw before, where children are sat up very, very early. And by the time they go into daycare at 8 months, they're already sitting up. And actually, by the time they come to my groups, when they are 8 weeks old or so, they're already being propped up and more reluctant to come into lying down. And so it's quite a sort of process from the beginning. What I'd love is to have some help and support. The more and more of us doing this work, who've done the Pickler training, Steiner Pickler training, and beginning to do this mum and baby work, but we'd love to work with children's centres and with daycare and people just to get this bit right, just at the really early bit. Of course, parents are being advised by health professionals to sit babies up. I need to show you just a couple of videos. It's terrible. It's like rush. This one.
Simon wil graag.
This is from Holland. You see what's happened to him? He's been sat up too early and he's got stuck. He can't move. There's another one I wanted to show you of a little girl scooching across the floor. We think that's normal, but that only happens when you've been sat up too early. So this is what I was going to bring you, but a much shortened version. I'll just show you one more thing. There's the Pickler Association, the Pickler Collection has a good selection of information about this approach. And yes, we've got our little stand out there. And I'd be very happy to talk to anybody who'd like to talk about this more. Thank you very much.
Sorry. I'm sorry, we are running frightfully late, so I'm